Now to developing news in northern Iraq, where the U.S. launched an airstrike overnight. Officials say the bombing was in response to a drone attack that wounded at least 3 U.S. soldiers, one of whom is now in critical condition.
The drone attack was launched by Hezbollah, a terrorist group that is backed by Iran. Iraq's prime minister condemning both Hezbollah and the U.S. He says the U.S. airstrike was a hostile act and infringes on Iraq's sovereignty.
Joining us tonight to discuss this is Javed Ali, an associate professor at the University of Michigan, who teaches classes on terrorism and national security. Thanks for joining us today, Javed.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me again.
So it seems like since October 7th, since the Hamas-Israel conflict began, we've been hearing a lot of this, a lot of stories about groups linked to Iran attacking U.S. forces. So can you kind of give us a brief description of exactly what's happening and how frequent are these attacks?
Yeah, so there's multiple layers here, but even jumping off from October 7th, from the Hamas attacks, that there are a number of groups backed by the Iranian government stretching from Lebanon all the way now to Yemen, which Iran calls the axis of resistance. And one of those groups in Iraq is called Kata'ib Hezbollah, and this is the group that was responsible for the drone attack and then the U.S. retaliation overnight that your previous reporting indicated. But taking a longer view of this, the U.S. has actually been in conflict with Iraq-based Shia groups like Kata'ib Hezbollah for almost 20 years. So when the U.S. war with Iraq started in 2003, that's when this conflict with these Iranian-backed groups in Iraq started. So this goes back for almost 20 years. What we're only seeing now is the most current manifestation of it.
Is this retaliation different than what's been going on for the past 20 years, or is this just more of the same and we haven't maybe noticed it, or is this one different in any way?
Well, when the coalition troops, to include the U.S. troops, were on the ground in Iraq from 2003 to 2011, groups like Kata'ib, Hezbollah, and other Iranian-backed Shia militias in Iraq were responsible for the deaths of literally hundreds of American troops. So, and then injuring thousands more. So there was much more direct conflict with these Shia militias then. Since then, it's been more low level, where these groups in Iraq and now other parts of the region will launch these rocket attacks, drone attacks, ballistic missile attacks, sometimes against U.S. Facilities or installations, because we still have U.S. troops on the ground in Iraq and Syria, and the U.S. will respond, trying not to over-escalate the situation, but also sending a message. So this cycle of low-level attacks and U.S. retaliation has been going on for almost a decade after the Iraq War ended in 2011.
So what is the goal then there? You mentioned they want to deter any further attacks without escalating this. So how might a wider conflict be avoided by these retaliatory airstrikes?
Well, this is the challenge, that if these Iranian-backed attacks in this axis of resistance going from Lebanon now to Yemen, if they lead to more U.S. casualties or worst case fatalities, that may up the ante for the United States to respond more aggressively than we've responding already. And then that's where this cycle of retaliation can really escalate in ways that it's hard to contain. So right now, it's not sure if the U.S. has restored deterrence, because probably a couple days from now, a week from now, we'll hear news of another pattern of these types of attacks. They may not come from groups in Iraq, like the most recent one. They could come from some of these other groups across the region. But make no mistake, these are all backed by Iran and part of a broader Iranian strategy to keep the U.S. off balance in the region.
All right. Well, Professor Javed Ali from the University of Michigan, thank you so much for your time today.
All right. Thank you and happy holidays.